So the fact that you've been a broadcaster for 41 years suggests to me that you didn't follow a career in the city for all that long. So how did that go?
Well, it didn't go very well, actually. I mean, I quite enjoyed it, but I don't think I'd have been very good at it, really. And I got made redundant. So obviously I wasn't very good at it. And when I started looking for a job, so I got a job interviewing accountants for an employment agency. I knew nothing about accountancy. That was a bit of a rum job, really, because if you got very badly paid. I'm a master of getting jobs with bad pay, and you only got paid on commission. If you got someone a job, you got quite a good little sort of payout, but they had to stay in their job for 3 months. And once I got 4 people a job, and they all left, so I had to give all my money back. So I thought, that's no good. And when a friend of mine had a cousin who worked in a bookshop, who ran a bookshop, small bookshop in Covent Garden, art and architecture and fine art and stuff like that. And he was looking for an assistant to doing packing, ordering, delivering. It was really good fun, and I did that for 4 or 5 years. That was good. It was in Covent Garden before it became ultra trendy. The fruit market had closed down. It was sort of it was the punk days. There used to be a club called the Roxy in Neal Street. That was just round the corner. Neal's Yard had just started.
So were you a regular at the Roxy?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
I think but I think the Police played there. I think
all the top bands.
Played there.
Before my time as well, but
yeah, they were there.
So, and then.
Well, I tell you what happened then.
Oh, good.
Because I was sitting at my desk eating an orange, and a friend of mine rang. He used to ring a lot. My friend Nick, who's sadly no longer with us, but he'd seen an advert. He was always he was very good at he brought in sort of rather fatherly help, and he saw an advert in the Sporting Life. It's a broadcaster, sports writer. I didn't say who it was for. He said, you ought to give it a go. And I thought, well, I haven't done either of those things. Although I quite like the thought of, I used to have a reel-to-reel tape recorder at home, and I used to record my own programs, and I used to like interviewing people and things like that. So it was always sort of in the blood. Anyway, I think I was the only person to answer the ad, and I got the job, and that was Mecca Bookmakers. So that was the first step with racing. And
so, what was the job then actually?
The job was, well, at that time, all the information to betting shops was supplied by Exchange Telegraph, Extel. You used to get that sort of disembodied voice, going behind stalls, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And those exciting finishes when they're all grouping up.
Making rapid late headway.
I used to love rapid late headway.
Everybody used to love rapid
late headway. But I think
headway.
I'd like to say, and other firms may disagree, but Mecca were the first company to dispose of the Extel commentary and do our own. We used to re-speak commentaries. We used to do, sports program. We could do it. It was like a sort of a child's sort of playroom, really. You could do exactly what you wanted. There were 3 of us. I had 2 assistants, and we used to do. We broadcast greyhound racing from Cambridge Dogs. That was our own exclusive, and we did loads of things. And that sort of led on to SIS actually, because the 2 people who employed me there, Bill Hogwood and Bobby Green, were almost the fathers of SIS. So I was in the right place at the right time, and I got a job at SIS.
And at that time, were you, previously with Mecca, you got an interest in tennis and cricket? Were you covering that as well?
Yeah, no, I loved that. It was very good. We had, I employed, I say it sounds rather sort of, boastful, a cricket reporter, Terry Blake, who became, I think he used to do quite well in the cricket world, but he used to go and report from there was I don't know if they had a World Cup then, but there was something in England. I think there was a World Cup in England, a one-day thing like an ODI. And we got press tickets at the Oval and places like that. We used to get press passes to Wimbledon, just applied for them. So we had little sports bulletins during the afternoon. Used to drive the betting shop managers completely balmy. You know what they're like. Have you ever been a betting shop, worked in a betting shop?
No, I haven't, no. I spent a lot of time in betting shops in my misspent youth.
But you know what betting shop managers can be like. There's quite sort of not that keen on change, and when this sort of, I mean, my audition tape sounded like Edward VIII abdicating. It sounded very sort of, stiff and pompous. I sort of modelled myself on Julian Wilson, I think, in those days, because that's all you could. It was either him or Jimmy Lindley, and I went for the first option. So, but we used to, it caught on.
And so, what was the working environment like? Was it like a studio, or were you in an office?
We had a little studio in the text room. It's the early days of teletext. Would you remember the Oracle and teletext and all that sort of thing? And again, it was a completely new idea. Actually, not taking the prices from Extel, but actually getting prices from the racetrack. In the early days of mobile phones, they weighed as much as a car battery, and I was sent off to Lingfield to send back prices to our text room, and then they put them on teletext, and that was real cutting edge stuff in those days.
So were you a race goer before that?
Oh God, yes, yeah.
So you mentioned the point to points, but
I used to go racing with. It used to be 3 or 4 of us, and we used to go every weekend, and frequently more whenever possible, really.
And now you mentioned earlier Bill Hogwood, and I don't know if you mentioned Bill Green, but Bill Green I've got here set up SIS.
Bobby Green.
Yeah, Bobby Green.
Yeah.
So were you you were the man on the spot basically? So were you asked to be involved, or did you?
No, I was asked to be involved. We did a. I've got the tape somewhere. It's fantastic. We put sound effects it's like sort of ticker tape thing. We used a sewing machine, I think, to sort of wound the handle. And Richard Pittman was involved in that. And we did this sort of video, sort of promoting the whole thing. And I think I did a commentary from Sandown. I had about 100 goes at it to get it right. But anyway, it eventually I forget which year SIS started now, May 87, 86, something like that.
And what's the timescale where Cornelius Lysaght gave you sort of a leg up into Radio 5?
Oh, that was great, because first of all, when I was working at SIS, there was race call, when you used to be able to ring.
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
0898.
Yeah, and Cornelius was very much part of that. And I think I might either wrote, because I'd never met him before, I think I wrote to him. I knew of him as this sort of, much revered figure of racing, Cornelius, and I wrote to him, and I came along for a trial afternoon it used to be Smithfield Market, and people like Rawley Gilbert and Peter Bromley and all sorts of people turned up there, but it was great fun. And then 5 Live started. So I forgot your initial question. In 1990, although it was just Radio 5 in those days, an extra channel, and there was a racing bulletin. We used to get hours of, about sort of, used to come to us about 25 past 7, and we were still talking about 25 to 8. Now, it doesn't get anything, does it?
So did that run parallel with what you were doing at SIS?
Yeah, it did.
I've been told to ask you about putting money in the meter at the BBC.
What, the parking meter?
I don't know. I was just told to ask you about the money in the meter. Does that ring a bell with you?
No.
Any other stories in the BBC?
I remember. No, I mean it was quite daunting, in fact, because it was always a race against time, and I had no idea how to use the computer. I used to write it out in longhand, but once you were sort of logged on, because I didn't dare ask anyone, because there were all these sort of people I'd only listened to on the radio. John Inverdale was there in the morning bulletin and things like that, and there were loads of people. Jeff Stelling was on the morning shift. It was great, and but I only remember the meter. You used to park outside, and you used to have to make sure you were out by the time that either the meter started. Otherwise, you earned so little, you were down on the day.
So how different was it working for the BBC than it was for the SIS? I imagine it was a bit stuffy.
Yeah, I mean, I was only there in the mornings. I was filling in when, it was on days Cornelius couldn't do. And I used to do 3 or 4 days a month, the morning bulletin. It was great. And then Luke carried on doing that afterwards. Luke Harvey did it probably far better. But it's funny how attitudes have changed, because you know, whereas racing was quite sort of big business in those days on the radio. Now it's, you know, it's been sort of pushed out the back door.
Now, you were first seen, your voice was well known, but you were first seen on the racing channel. Is that correct?
Yes, I first seen actually on SIS actually, because on SIS we used to have a lunchtime program which Ian Carnaby used to present half the week, and Richard Pittman used to do the other half. And there was one time, and usually, you know, they were always there, but there was one time, it was on when the Grand National Weights came out, so maybe they were both there. There was no one, and I was sort of volunteered. In other words, sort of pushed into the studio, had my smart double-breasted suit on and everything like that. And I did that with a script you had to sort of follow. You could do very little ad-libbing. I did a little bit. That was quite daunting, but that was my first taste of sitting in front of a camera.
And when that finished, did you think, oh, this is another avenue I could pursue, or did that just happen?
Well, I might have thought that, but no one else did, because nothing happened for years afterwards. No.
Okay, I might have been given a bum steer with the money in the meter, but can you tell me about the Mickey Fitz going to the opera?
I'm intrigued by the money in the meter.
You're going to have to ask one of your old colleagues about that.
I will have to do that, yeah. Mick Fitzgerald and the opera, yes, because I've only been married twice, I say only, but my first wife, Fiona, was and is a very good writer on classical music. And she had put forward the idea that to try and find people from outside music who were interested in, you know, either opera or, you know, something like that. Anyway, somewhere, I think it might have been Cornelius who told me actually, but Mick Fitzgerald was an opera buff. I've seen no evidence of it since, but anyway, he accepted. He was riding at Worcester, I think, in the afternoon. I'd never met him. No, I'd never met him. Might have met him once. Anyway, he turned up at Covent Garden. This was, you know, real proper stuff, Madame Butterfly. And he turned up in his bow tie and everything, spot on time. And we had a very good evening. My wife, Fiona, Mick, and myself, and we had a very good meal afterwards, and it was a very good evening. I ought to remind him about that.
So you've not had a second outing?
You wouldn't want to go out twice with him.